Hare Krishna, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desetarine Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki Jai. So, I had some initial brushes, so to speak, with Krishna Consciousness. I think the earliest one was that after my master's in engineering in Pilani, I came to Bombay and I was working with Air India in the computer division. And once, that was between 74 and 77, 3 years I was in Bombay. And I could have, if it was Krishna's will, met with the ISKCON movement and met Srila Prabhupada. But so once during those days, I remember coming to have dinner with, I had an apartment in Kolaba, and I had a flatmate by name Amulendu Dev. And his elder brother, who had written from England with a PhD in chemistry, was working, I think, with Hindustan Liver. And he had a house right opposite to the temple in Rose Garden, I think. So at that time, the guest house was just being built up. It might have been 75 or something. And we had dinner, and I remember we were sitting in his living room, and through the window I looked, and I saw the half-built guest house, the Gauranga Towers, what used to be called the Gauranga Towers. And then his brother remarked, and he had a real British accent, and he said, the Hare Krishnas are building a huge temple here. And I said, who are the Hare Krishnas? I don't even think I asked that, and I didn't even know, and I didn't pay attention. And I'm just sitting right opposite to the temple. And in any case, in 76, I think I went to England using my free pass, Air India pass. I had a brother who lived, one of my brothers lived in England. And during the day I would come to the city to take in the tourist sites, and I was in that Trafalgar Square, which was a long, wide road. And as I was walking, I remember this faint, over the traffic, I heard this chick, 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 chick. And I turned and I looked, and I saw some, Western ladies in saris. And I didn't see the saffron-clad devotees. And I remember that I recognized it was a Kartal. And when I grew up in Chennai, in Margari month, which is, I think, Kartik or whatever we call it.
December.
It's a December month. They used to have early morning kirtans like that. So I was thinking, whoa, who is doing the kirtan in England and London, This was afternoon time. And anyway, that must have been the Harinam party from the Soho temple. And I just went. Those were my initial brushes. Then in 77, I went to States to work. And I was working in different companies. I was doing, system software design in those days. And, initially I had somehow come in touch with spirituality, suddenly by reading some, books that so many Babas were writing at that time, Muktananda, and there was one, Ramdas. His book was probably the first one I read. And I was very intrigued suddenly because I was very secular. And I'm from a Sri Vaishnava family. Of course, we worshipped Vishnu, and we will go to the temple or something. But I was not particularly aware of Siddhanta or theology. And apart from a general feeling of friendship that I always had with Vishnu, I was not even very clear that he was God. I liked him, and I always thought he was a nice person to know. And we had a big Vishnu picture in our house, and everyday food was offered. And so then what happened one day, one summer, I think it was probably the 78 summer, I went to Florida on a vacation. And I stayed in a hotel in I think, I don't know, Miami or some place, in Orlando was a little distance from there. And there was a bus that went from wherever I stayed in the hotel to Disney World or Disneyland, one of the two. And I got into that bus and I was going, and the bus stopped somewhere in between for, rest stop, and I was going to the restroom. And as I was going to the restroom, one young brahmachari came, this Westerner, brahmachari in saffron clothes, but I was so modern and that I was not even reacting to the fact that he was wearing a saffron dress. And he asked me, "Where are you from?" And of course, he knew, and I also realized he knew that I'm originally from India, but he was asking where I was in the United States, because that was a tourist stop. I said, "I'm from Detroit." And he said, "Oh, really? We serve free vegetarian prasadam," he said, "every Sunday." And that caught my attention, because although I had my own computer company in States at that time and I was making a lot of money, I was not getting good food at all, because I was single and I didn't know how to cook. And in those days there were not many Indian restaurants or anything, there were not so many Indians at that time, and not in a place like Detroit in any case. And so I was, that caught my attention, because I was a vegetarian and I was not getting good food. In any case, he gave me a BTG, and I don't think I gave him any donation. He didn't ask for it. And I took the BTG into the bus, and I remember flipping through it, and I saw so many pictures of Krishna, and it looked like some articles about Hinduism. And I remember this saying with a snigger, what do these guys know about Hinduism, Like I think most Hindus, I myself didn't know much about Hinduism, but I thought I knew, and I thought in any case Westerners couldn't know. And I remember leaving that back to Godhead right in the bus itself, in the upper luggage rack. I'm sure, there must be someone else right now narrating a story saying how he took a bus from, returning from Orlando to Miami, and he found on the luggage rack a Back to Godhead magazine, and then he became a devotee because Prabhupada said, his literatures are like, time bombs. They're ticking, and they'll go to the right person and they'll have their effect at the right time. In any case, that was that. And I came back to Detroit. I was doing my work, and I think at that time I was doing a project for Chrysler. And I needed to use the entire computer for myself for testing some big packages. And so I was working on usually in the evenings and nights and over weekends. So one Saturday night I had worked all night. I came back and I slept. And I woke up around 3 p.m. in the afternoon Sunday. And I was ravenously hungry. And I said, I'm not going to cook today, Then I suddenly, Krishna put this thought in my mind. Hey, someone said that they distribute free prasadam, vegetarian prasadam. Who is that? And I did not know that there were even, hippie movement, and there was a lot of interest in Eastern thought in the West. I didn't know all those things. So then for no good reason, I just called my friend who was doing, internship as a doctor, Raja Ram. He was from Chennai, my friend. He was a friend of mine. So I called him and I said, hey, I met somebody in Florida, and that guy said that they distribute free vegetarian prasadam. Do you know who it could be? Out of the blue. And he said, I don't know. Well, maybe it's the Hare Krishnas. I said, really? Who are they? He said, oh, they distribute prasadam. Free prasadam. What I didn't know is that this fellow was going regularly eating that free prasadam, and he had never called me ever once before. So when I said that, that's why he said maybe it's the Hare Krishnas. And I said, is the food good? He said, oh, it's better than home. And better than home, my eyes lit up, because I'm from, a Sri Vaishnava family. My house food is just spectacular. And he's also from, Smartha Brahmin family, and, his food is also, house food is very good. And if he's saying it's better than house food, oh man, that must be very good. So, and I was hungry like anything. So I asked him, where is this place? He said, well, if you just go down the same road where, I was off of Jefferson. He said, just go down all the way, and then you turn left on Lenox Street, and, you'll find a big building. And the temple is there. He didn't even say it's a big building. So I just jumped into my car and I drove there and went, and I found, those days there was no internet or anything. And I don't know, I think he just gave me approximate directions, and I found this big building. He said if you turn on Lennox, the first big building on your right side is a temple. That's the Fisher Mansion, which was owned by, previously built and owned by the owner of Cadillac Company. It was a mansion, big mansion with tremendous acreage of gardens, and behind is the Detroit River. And Amrish Prabhu and that Mataji, I just don't forget her name. She is the Elizabeth Reuter, I think her Karmi name was. And she's the daughter of a big labor union leader. And Ford, together they bought this mansion for Srila Prabhupada, and the temple was opened. So I didn't recognize it as a temple, because coming from South India, I thought that, this must be an ordinary building. But so when I went inside, I didn't go inside because I didn't know it was a temple, even though I think my friend told me it was a temple. I think it didn't register. And outside there were all these Sunday feasts because it was summer, and all the tubs were there, and there was nobody. And so I went and I opened the tub. All prasadam was gone. I was late, and nobody was there, and it was quiet. It was evening 6 or something. I guess people were going in for Tulsi Puja, and then 6:30, 7 o'clock Aarti. In any case, and there was just only one grain of rice in one tub. I said, let me just take it, and I took it. For some reason, I said, wow, this is good. And all I ate was just one grain of rice. And then I was going to go, and just as I was going out, one Indian came, and he was actually in civil dress. So I still did not know there were devotees in the place. And he said, oh, please take this book. And he gave me Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Part 1. In those days, the Bhagavatam was printed, in more than 12 or 18 volumes. It was 30 volumes or something. The first canto, which is now a single volume, was in 3 parts. So I got first canto, Part 1. I didn't know what this book was, Srimad Bhagavatam. I took it, I said, how much for this? He said, no, it's free, you read it. I said, well, okay. And I just put it in my car and I drove back. And that was a Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, I went to work. And Wednesday, I came back from work. And I was going to I always made just one item, rice and one type of cauliflower and tomato sabji with some gravy. And then I bought potato chips from the shop. In America, potato chips are very famous. And yogurt. And then I had some achar from the Indian shop. And then, I would eat. So I had called one of my classmates, Ramakrishnan, I think his name was, chemical engineering. I was in electronics. He had come over, and I cooked and we ate, of course, without offering to Krishna. And after that, he was sitting and reading some newspaper, and I sat in my sofa and I was thinking, what should I do? And then my eyes went to that book that was on top of my stereo. I said, wow, I said, what is that book? Let me read that. And I took that book and I sat down, and little did I know that in about 1 minute my life is going to change. And I opened and I looked at the cover, and then I looked at the dust jacket, and there was a complete description of creation. And I said, wow, it's a complete map of creation, the universe. I said, who wrote this, And then I saw, about this Vishnu and Mahavishnu and Narayanas. And coming from Sri Vaishnava, we know that, there's only, we didn't make a distinction between Vishnu or Mahavishnu or Narayana. And in any case, we thought that Krishna is one of the Dasa avatars, Vishnu or Mahavishnu or Narayana is the Lord, and Krishna is the incarnation. And in this book it says there is, 3 Vishnus and unlimited Narayanas, and then they're all coming from Balram, and Balram is coming from Krishna, and Krishna is the original. I said, wow, I never knew that. I remember sitting there, I reflected for about a few seconds. And then this thought went in my mind. I said, if I were to give somebody $50 billion and tell him, come up with the craziest description of the universe and conception of God, I said that nobody can come up with something like this. In other words, this is not something that someone write from imagination. So I said, since this cannot be imagined, but it's written, it must be true. And I said, who will have the guts to put down in writing that Krishna is the source of Narayana? That's, for me, that's impossible. I'm from Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. Then therefore I said, this must be true, I mean, it's just, otherwise it's unimaginable to me. Okay. And then I just read, I skipped the pages, there was some introduction, I skipped it. Then I saw a short introduction to the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And I remember once reading, the Ramakrishna Mission small booklet about Lord Chaitanya, and it presented him as a, God-intoxicated saint who was kind of addicted to dancing. I remember that vaguely when I was a schoolboy, I had read that. So that Lord Chaitanya, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember, he's a Bengal saint. I didn't know who was really Lord Chaitanya at that time. And then I turned, I said, okay, now I know about him. And then I just slipped out. Then I saw first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 1, it's in Sanskrit. I said, wow, this is a book in Sanskrit. I mean, I had studied Sanskrit in school, and then again, after years and years and decades, I'm coming in touch with Sanskrit. That was a shock to me. I said, wow. And then I tried to read it. It said, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And then I just read the Sanskrit a little bit, and then I gave up, and I was a little out of touch. Then there was word by word translation. I kind of saw it. Then I flipped the page, and there was this translation, one paragraph. And I read it. Wow, when I read that, that must have been evening 6 or 7. It's like I had a mystical experience. The roof opened, and kind of stars were coming down. And I was thinking, wow, this is like the greatest passage I've ever written, ever read in my life. And I think that my friend must have noticed something, because he kind of peered through the newspaper and he said, are you okay? I said, yeah. And I said, I just read a paragraph in which somebody has written in one paragraph anything, and everything that can be said about anything in one paragraph. I mean, there can be nothing more said about anything. And I said, I don't know how he could do this. And of course, that first paragraph is like a complete condensation of Vedanta, Vedas and the Vedanta, written by Vedavyas himself, who is going to now amplify it and write a commentary to the entire Vedas and Vedanta Sutra. I didn't know it at that time. And that just blew my mind, that translation, that verse, because I was known as a very good teacher in college, even as a student. And I knew that I could present things, and this presentation was mind-boggling. Then I started reading the purport. And in the purport, I read, one sentence that even the great impersonalists like Adi Shankara and Buddha, and that was another double take for me, because we all, even though we were Vaishnavites, we all just grew up, thinking Adi Shankara is great, and which he is, of course, and all the Shankaracharyas were respected by Vaishnavas and Shaivites alike, and so all the following Shankaracharyas. So for me, Adi Shankara was a great person, and Prabhupada wrote, even the great impersonalist Adi Shankara, and I could know that was like a dismissive thing. And I said, whoa. And then Buddha, and he said, and something about Buddha also. And I said, who is this person, He's just dismissing Adi Shankara, And I remember Bhaja Govindam song was made famous by M.S. Subbulakshmi when we were in college, and Raja Gopalachari, known as Rajaji, gave an introduction to it, and he would write there, Adi Shankara, who drank the ocean of knowledge as easily as one sips water from the palm of one's hand, and and so Adi Shankara was a great person, and somebody in print just dismisses him. I said, wow, where is this person? He is gutsy. And I was just reading the Bhagavatam, and after some time my friend asked me, are you going to talk to me or not? I said, no. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm reading this book. He said, then I'm going. I said, fine. And he left, and I kept reading, and I'm a very fast reader, and I read the whole night, the Bhagavatam. And I finished that first canto, part 1. I went to sleep around 2 o'clock or something. Next day I called my work, and I said, I'm not coming to work today. And then around something 2 o'clock or something, I got into the car, because I saw it said end of canto 1, part 1. I went to the same place. And again there was nobody, and again the same person was there. His name is Ayodhya Das, he's an elderly Indian who lives in Vrindavan now. He was the one who first gave me the Prabhupada book. And I went, and he was again there. I did not know that he had retired from Ford, and so he was Ford plant, and so he was spending a lot of his time there in the temple. And he saw me and said, "Hello, how are you?" And I said, "I'm fine." I went to him and I said, "This book that you gave me yesterday, it says end of Canto 1, Part 1, you know." I said, "Are there more parts?" He said, "Yeah." "How many?" He said, "Oh, there's 29 more." I said, "Okay, bring me all the 29. And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I want all of them." He said, "It'll cost you." I said, "Fine." Then he went inside. He spent a long time. Then he came back, and he just came back with one more book. And I said, "What is this?" He said, "This is part 2. Read it." I said, "Okay, but where are the other parts?" He said, "No, you read this and then I'll give you the next." What I did not know, later I found out, he went and told the temple president at that time, I think Govardhan Prabhu had just resigned at the time, and it was Naveen Krishna, I think, he was ready to become president. And he told him, that fellow, that, don't give all the books to that boy, because Indian boys rarely came to Hare Krishna temple in those days. So you just give him one, don't give him everything. So I didn't know that. So he said one. I said, "No, give me everything." And then he said, "No, you read this." I said, "I'll read it tonight." He said, "Tonight? No, this will take you some time." I said, No, I'm a fast reader. I'll just finish it in a few hours. Give me everything." And then I was so impatient, and I was getting angry with him. So he said, "Okay, you wait." Then he went inside, and finally he came up with some sets, which later turned out to be a third canto, part 4. And he said, "Okay, you take all this." And then I took my checkbook. I don't know what. I wrote a substantial donation. I didn't even ask him how much. In those days, I must have given a few $100s. I just wrote a checkbook. I gave the check, took the whole thing. I was reading. I started reading and reading and reading. And I had, right from, in fact, the very first day I read Prabhupada's book already, first canto, I had some kind of an encounter with Prabhupada on that very first day. So, Prabhupada was very kind. So he was always there from the beginning for me. And so I started reading the books. And each canto, when I read each part, I thought, okay, this is the maximum anyone can write. The next canto would have to be a repetition. Then I read the next part, and it goes beyond what that was said. Then I read the next part, then 3 parts is over. I said, okay, second canto onwards, it would have to be a summary of whatever was said. Then I go to second canto, it goes on another new topic. And I go to third canto, it goes another new topic. Third canto was 4 parts. And, soon I realized that the books that Prabhupada is asking, I didn't know who was Prabhupada. The person who was writing the book is saying you should chant Hare Krishna. I said, okay, I'll chant Hare Krishna. I was reading. I started chanting 8 rounds. And then I started trying to follow the regulative principles. There's no need to mention which ones I was breaking. But so, anyway, so I said, let me start following the regulative principles. And then, I'm going to go up to the time I joined the temple. Is that okay? So then what happened, which is, very soon. And I remember keeping this Bhagavatam book on my head in my room in the house and dancing. I somehow realized, I'm coming from South India, Sri Vaishnava tradition. The Divya Prabandham is something that we hold in great esteem. And I realized that Divya Prabandham must be a Tamil translation of this Bhagavatam, which later I realized it is. And, rendered in Tamil, not translation, by the great Alvars. Incomparable Alvars. So therefore, I was just even more attached to it, and I was terribly attached. And at that time, I had moved from Chrysler to General Motors, and I was already starting to preach in the General Motors. But I didn't know you have to distribute books. I didn't know there was ISKCON, and I didn't know there were books. And then soon I moved. I was still staying in Detroit, but I got a project at AC Spark Plug, which was a division of General Motors in Flint. So one day, suddenly, one Sunday afternoon, this guy calls me, Rajaram. He says, "So, did you ever go to the place?" I said, "Yeah, I went once, but I didn't get any food." He said, "Oh, you must have gone late." He said, "You have to go, exactly, in time. I'm going today. Do you want to go?" So what I didn't know is that this guy, he had worked it down to a formula, and he knew when the evening program is, when the prasadam is, everything. I didn't know that. So he said, "Okay, let's go." And he came and he picked me up, and we went 4:15 Arthik. I just entered the temple. He knew, went straight into the temple. There was nobody there. I saw Prabhupada's murti there, but I didn't react or anything, and I was waiting. And then the curtains somebody came from behind, a black devotee, tall devotee. He blew the conch. And I said, "Whoa, what's he blowing a conch for?" And then suddenly And the doors opened, curtains opened, and I said, oh, this is a temple. And my friend said, of course it's a temple. You didn't know? I said, no. He said, it's a Hare Krishna temple. I said, wow. And I had never been to a temple that until then in America. And then from somewhere, devotees started coming. And whites, blacks, blues, reds, and ping, dang, mridanga, and kartals and dancing. And I saw these fellows jumping up and down to the roof. I said, weird. In South India, everybody goes to temple. They're very, very quiet. So what's happening here? I said, dancing. Wait a second. Then I asked him, why are these guys jumping up and down like this? He said, this is Bengal Vaishnavism. He said, they are into dancing. Really? I said, you dance in temples? He said, oh, they do. In Bengal, they do that. And then I was watching for a long time. And then I went to him and I said, you know what? I said, either these guys are totally high on drugs or they are really something spiritual, I said, this can't be anything in between. And I said, I'm going to find out. So I kind of, And then there was actually a class after that. And somebody was giving a class and I had already read up to 4 cantos. So, third canto, part 4. I knew considerable philosophy. And so I was hearing the talk, and I didn't know at the time the movement, the preaching movement, and I said, okay, he knows a little bit philosophy, like that. I was thinking, for my first day, but he must have been a senior devotee. But I was thinking like, okay, he knows, but I thought I knew some philosophy, which I didn't. It took me a long time to realize that. And then this fellow, before the question and answer session began, he went out. So I followed him. I said, where are you going? He said, oh, after the question and answer session, there'll be a big crowd. And he went straight and he stood first next to the prasadam table. I said, I saw all the things, prasadam. And then the prasadams were served. My God, there were about 50 to 60 dishes, 6 kinds of rice, 10 kinds of sabji, and the paneer sabji. The paneer was all this big slabs of paneer. And there's so many kinds of sabjis and rasagullas, this big rasagullas, gulab jamuns, 3 kinds of cheesecakes, and 4 kinds of lassis, mango lassi, strawberry lassi, this and that, parathas and chapatis, and incredible food. And this guy was piling up his plate, so I said, I'm going to pile up. I was hungry. And I sat and took it. Whoa, man, this was unimaginable. But by the time I knew this was prasadam, and I grew up eating temple prasadam, in Madhav Koil next to, in Kacheri Road. So every afternoon I have taken pongal there, this and that. So, wow, so I'm used to the taste. And this was exactly the taste. And I said, wow, this is fantastic. And I ate, and I think I had twice. And I told him, you have been coming here? He said, oh, I come regularly. I said, you rascal, why you never told me this? This is such good food. He said, I don't know. I didn't know you'd be interested. And then anyway, soon I read Prabhupada's books. I was going to Flint and General Motors, and I was convinced I would join. And I'll just tell you what happened on the last day at work. About 4 months after I read Srila Prabhupada's books, I was convinced I should join full time, and this was sometime in late 70s. And but I waited for another 3 months because I had a very big job, and I was making a lot of money, and I didn't want to later think like, oh, I made a mistake and go back to work. I said, you leave work, I'm not going to look back. Therefore, make sure that because I understood, ISKCON allowed devotees to be married and stay at home and work. But I was interested to join full time because these books changed me so much that I wanted everyone to get the benefit of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And by the time I was going every Sunday to the temple, and so I realized that Prabhupada wanted these books to be distributed, and that is one of the main aims of ISKCON, or the foremost aim. And I said, I want to join this movement and help distribute books. That was my sole goal. Otherwise, I knew that for my personal salvation, I could just stay at home and be married, which my mother definitely wanted, and do things. So anyway, and one interesting thing happened in the meanwhile, which is that I was going first Sundays. That was not enough. Then I used to go Saturdays. Friday evenings to temple stay till Sunday night. Monday morning I'll go to work. And after some time I called the temple and I said, I want to move into the temple. And they said, fine, So I had, I had decided, and it was decided on a Friday I would move into the temple. So that Thursday I went to the temple and I said, look, I want to distribute some prasadam before I go. I had a pretty high position there as an executive. So they were all high-class executives there, meaning materially high-class in General Motors. So I said, I want to distribute some prasadam. So they cooked, prasadam, because it's General Motors. In those days it was the world's biggest company. And so I went. They gave me 4 or 5 tubs of spectacular prasadam, and that was all loaded into my car. Then that day I went into the front where all those big executives, super executives park, and I got a temporary pass for that day. And from there I took all the boxes in. Everybody was watching, and then some people were saying, typical American, that smells good. Wow, what is that on Friday? And I had told already everybody that don't go for your lunch tomorrow, I'm bringing Indian lunch. And that was very unusual in those days. In any case, most of the people have never taken Indian food or something in those days. And I kept everything in one room, and I had paper plates, towels and everything. And by the time the word spread that, Ravi has brought stuff that really smells good. And then I opened it at lunchtime, 1 o'clock. And slowly, I think somebody came. Mike Hazlett was the nicest guy there. I told him, Mike, come on. So he came and he took, okay, I'll try it. I'll try anything once. And he came. And then he just took, and then, he says, this is good. And then he went out and he told, this is fantastic. All of you guys should try. Then, some of the secretaries and some of the executives, they all came. And, they started, and everybody took. There was this, and I used to, just by the time I knew ISKCON, I had a lot of small books and I was distributing, and there was this one guy, Bill Gamble, and he will never take my books. And he said, no, he was a practicing Christian. I know this, but I would be in suit and all that at work. But he said, I know this is Hare Krishna's. He said, I know you guys try to convert everybody. I said, no, Bill. He said, just read this. No, it's fine, keep it. So I was doubtful whether he would eat, and he didn't come to eat. And word spread like anything, and people were coming from every department, because there was cheesecake and this and that. And finally I distributed it for 100 to 200 people, very well placed people at General Motors. And then at the end, when it was practically nothing was there, then Bill Gamble kind of ambled into the room, and he said, I said, come on, Bill, are you going to try or not? He said, I might. He said, how many this? People are raving about it. And then he came, and I said, come on, let me make you a plate. He said, no. By the way, I know that, this is another way you guys preach. This is some kind of a holy, sanctified food, right? I said, yeah. And he said, I know. And I said, I don't think everybody else knows. Then he said, he just came there, and he just looked at the rice tub, and he said, give me just that 1 grain of rice. Exactly like I had 1 grain of rice. I said, okay. And I gave it to him. And he took it, and like me, he said, wow, he said, that is good. And I said, well, from 1 grain, what can you tell? He said, no, this is fantastic. Okay, you can make me a plate. Then I made him a plate, and he ate. I said, hey, Bill, that's great. And then I distributed everything by the evening, and I had about 200 BTGs taken, distributed everybody free, books and everything. And by the time they all knew that I was going to become a monk, and they were shocked because I was in a very good position, and there were very few Indians at work in those days. People were students or in the campuses. So Americans were shocked, and when they learned I was joining Hare Krishna's, which they knew it was a cult or something, and Ravi, is so intelligent, this and that, how come? But they respected it. In any case, and this is the last story, and this is mind-blowing, and I must say this. Then what happened, and in General Motors, from my workplace, my parking lot was at the back, and you have to go through a long tunnel, and during winter, snow will be there, and so they have built a tunnel through which you go to the parking lot. Not a tunnel, passageway, closed passageway, and it's long. And at the end of the long tunnel, especially in winter, there used to sit a black lady. She was a security guard. She was always be dead drunk. Her eyes red, and it's not legal, But she would keep, whiskey bottle or something under the table, and she would drink, and I think people knew. But, people didn't want, because blacks were so few in the labor force at the time, fine, they didn't say anything, and she had a, security uniform. And every time I would pass her, by the time I had become a devotee, I used to think, wow, how is she going to be saved? How can I preach to her or something? I used to think all the time, but I didn't muster the guts to talk to her. So that day, when I went to the last day, I parked in the front, and but for a week or something she was not there. So I knew that they have moved her, and so she was no longer there. So I thought at least I could give her some prasadam on that day, and I knew she wouldn't be there, and plus I'm going out through the front door. So then I go to and I take everything, and I put them back, so they helped me, some of my friends, because they had taken lunch, and then I had one more tub left. I said, I'll take it, and then with the tub and with some BTGs I had on top, I was carrying it, and I went through that security shack that's also in the front to go to the executive parking place, and that lady was sitting there. I was shocked, because I was praying to Lord Chaitanya, why is that lady, how can I preach, give prasadam to her? I was actually praying that afternoon. And I go through the door, and I was really stunned. I said, oh my God, Lord Chaitanya is really kind. And so I went to her, and I put the tub down, and I said, hi, how are you? And she was a bit surprisingly sober, because she was, I think, in the front security shack, which all the big executives come. She said, hey man, how are you? I said, fine, I'm fine. Today is my last day at work. And she said, really? And I said, yep. And she said, you know what you should do? And this is a real story, no? I said, yeah, what do you think I should do? And she said, you should preach the message of God. I said, what? I said, what is this? I said, really? And she said, yeah, word of God, man, spread it around. So I understood she must be one of those, very devout black, church-going Christian. And blacks are quite devout. I was amazed. I said, for all you know, she must be a big devotee, And I said, actually, tomorrow I'm moving into your temple, I'm going to become a monk. And she said, good for you, I used to see you all the time, you used to come in the back. I said, yeah, you remember me? She said, yeah, I remember you. And I used to always think, you're wasting your time, you should be preaching the word of God. I'm going like, whoa, there's nothing that I can give her, So I said, well, anyway, as it happens, I'm going to be a monk. She said, good. And I said, can I give you, a book? She said, sure. And I gave her a back to garden. I had a picture of Radha Krishna in the front. And she took that, and she looked at that, and she said, I have been waiting for this for 20 years. I said, what, this miracle is not going to end or not? And I said, come on, be reasonable. I said, why would you wait for this book? She said, I had this book, and I left it on a plane, some years back. I don't know whether it was 20 years or whatever it is. She said some years ago. I thought by now I was not really sure whether she knows what she's talking. I said, why would you, leave it in a plane? She said, man, I got this in the airport from one of those guys. They shave their head and keep hair at the back. I got from them this book, and I was reading it, and I liked this picture so much. But and my daughter she was a young girl at the time, and she wanted to see through the pictures, and she forgot it in the plane. And since then, I was always been thinking, I want this picture. Thank you so much. And I've been waiting for this for years. And I said, wow. Then I gave her some prasadam also. And I just went. I drove back to my house, locked everything. Next day morning, the temple van came. And I went and I joined as a brahmachari. And here I am, maybe 34 years later, hanging around, hoping to still make progress. So I pray to all the Vaishnavas, they can bless me so that finally I can go past this animal life where I'm still, and at least become a human being and hopefully a devotee. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.